Are you looking to purchase an RV, especially if this is your first RV? We both know you have a lot on your mind. Now, luckily, there's a lot of great videos out there to help you do your research and to help you maybe even make up your mind for you. But in this video, we want to cover some of the things that we didn't think too much about when we were doing our research.
Yeah, some of the things that we didn't know. Like, you think that you need this, but you don't need it. Things that you think you need that you don't need, and things that you need that you don't think you need. So stick around and we'll share our lessons with you. Before we continue with the video, we'd like to ask you to please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, ring the red bell, leave any questions or comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Now, on with the show.
When you're purchasing an RV, again, especially if you're new to RVing, there's so many videos out there that can really help you out. And that's what we did when we were doing our research. We looked at a lot of videos.
A lot.
You know, what's the best kind of RV, the best kind of tow vehicle, best kind of hitch, blah, blah, blah. You got to do things this way, you have to do things that way. But now that we've been on the road for a while, we really found some things that maybe weren't as accurate, or things for us were slightly different. Personally, there's no right or wrong answer. There's just their opinions, and you have to, you know, base some of your decisions on other people's opinions. But these are some of the things that we found that maybe we didn't think about in the very beginning, things that probably come up more often than we expected. And that's kind of what we want to go through today. We don't want to cover the big major issues like this is the best RV or this is the best tow vehicle, Ford.
Grand Design.
We don't want to cover that today. We're going to cover some of the smaller stuff. So let's go ahead and get started with tools. There's a lot of videos out there about tools, RV tools, things you have to have with you. Now, the only problem I have with this is you may have a video that says you have to have a multimeter, or you have to have plumbing tools with you, or maybe even a tire repair kit. Personally, I do agree with that. We have all three of those. But if you're not an electrician or you don't know how to use a multimeter, then it doesn't do you any good. If you're not strong enough to plug a patch into a plug into a tire, it doesn't do you any good. If you can't fix plumbing leaks, you don't know how to do it, you're not comfortable with it, then plumbing tools doesn't do you any good. So just be aware of that. So I just want to kind of show you some of the tools that we use, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but at least on a weekly basis. And some of these are probably gotten surprised. And these are very small. I'm not telling you to go buy anything, but you'll probably already have these. And
we're not downplaying any of these. You have to learn on your own for yourself what works for you to have, because it's going to take up storage, especially if you're a full-timer in your RV. It's going to take up room in your home on wheels. So we don't want to, we're not saying anything bad about anything. We're just wanting to give you more to think about. And these are some practical things too. I think the most expensive thing here is probably $5, but these are things that we use more often than not. For sure. Very first thing, and everybody's aware of this, duct tape. Seriously. We always carry duct tape with us. Fortunately for us, so far, we haven't had to use it. That's why it's still rolled up. Duct tape is great for small emergencies. Maybe if you have a hose that's leaking, hopefully you might be able to fix it, a temporary fix with duct tape, maybe to get you to your next spot long enough for that. So it's really for emergencies, patching maybe something dragging, a canvas, something dragging, just to connect something. Again, duct tape is just, it's one of those things that it's a guy thing, right? You gotta have it. But you can't go wrong with duct tape, I don't think.
The next item on our list, this is again very simple. It's really just a screwdriver, but it's not any old screwdriver. If you look on the
that sounds like a gimmick right there.
If you look on the tip of it, this is a square head, and this comes out. These you can buy these anywhere, but RVs, at least our RV, instead of using a Phillips head or a standard head screw, they use these little square-headed screws. And what happens, and I'm sure if you've been looking at RVs, you've been talking to salesmen, that what do they tell you? You're driving down the road in a hurricane and an earthquake, right? And that's really pretty true. We find lots of times when we get somewhere, we have a few screws loose.
Hey! Luckily.
Luckily.
That's not funny.
But yeah, so
I'm glad you're happy with yourself. You're tickled to death, aren't you?
I'm funny.
You may not see him in next week's video.
But we do use our screwdriver quite a bit. It's very common to go somewhere, maybe we put our ramp down, those sliding doors in the back, have the screws just a little bit loose. Now what we normally do is anytime we do find a loose screw, I'll go ahead and back it out, put a little bit of Loctite on it and screw it back down. So hopefully we don't have to deal with that one particular screw again.
And just driving around, how many times have I told you, oh, there's nails coming out in this wall, oh, there's staples sticking out in this wall.
Yeah.
It's so all the time.
Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Nothing big, not a big problem, but it does happen. So that kind of leads us.
Vibration.
Yeah. That kind of leads us into the next tools, and these kind of go hand in hand. Dina just mentioned about nails coming out, and we're talking little finished nails. So if you can think about all the trim in the RV, they use, lots of times they'll use glue and either staples or little tiny finishing nails. So we always carry some glue with us. Yes. Again, this is just something.
The best, Gorilla Glue.
We never would have thought about this when we were first looking at RVs, but again, it's one of those things that
very handy.
We find ourselves using.
Some of the baseboards, trims, whatever you want to call it, throughout the RV is not stapled or nailed, it's glued. Yeah. And after a while, some of that glue just wears off and you find little pieces of your finishing trim just laying in the middle of the floor or in Rodeo's mouth or whatever. So Gorilla Glue is good.
Yeah. And that brings us to the last tool that we're going to talk about today. And this was a total surprise. This is something I never would have expected.
Yeah.
This is a little 5-ounce hammer. Now,
don't try anything with that on me.
What we use this for is going back to those little finishing nails and the staples coming out of the walls. When we first started noticing some of our...
Oh, the dresser.
The dresser,
Yes.
Our dresser had good point. Our dresser had a lot of these little nails coming out of it. And what I did, I have a regular hammer that I carry with me, and I was trying to hammer those back in with there. And it's kind of like using a sludge hammer. You know, it's just it's way overkill. Yeah. I went to, I believe it was Home Depot or Lowe's. I bought this. It's a little 5-ounce hammer. I think it was like $5. And it's perfect. Yeah. Now whenever we find a nail or a staple coming out of the wall, I can take this real small hammer, and it doesn't take much force. You're just kind of tapping it back in place. Yeah. So these are some of the little things that we use more often than some of the bigger tools. Yeah. Like we do carry multimeters, we do carry air compressors, all the kind of things you're going to read about and everybody's telling you to buy. Yes, we do carry those. But these are some of the things that we use more often than not.
Yeah, that's what we're always reaching for.
The next thing we want to talk about are tires. If you've been researching RVs at all, I'm sure you've heard all about good tires and bad tires, China bombs, things that explode going down the road. These are all things you have to be aware of, but there's also a few other things to be aware of as well. Now one of the very first things we actually purchased when it comes to tires is a TPMS, tire pressure monitoring system. And this is what we have right here. This is used on travel days. And what this does, it monitors all 6 of our tires on our RV. It monitors both pressure and temperature. Now what that allows us to do is, as we're traveling down the road, if we have a slow leak in one of our tires, we can see it. We can also set thresholds, so if the tire pressure gets a little bit lower than what it's supposed to be, an alarm will go off. If the temperature gets too high, an alarm will go off. This is really, it's kind of, I don't want to call it preventative maintenance, but hopefully it's at least an early warning. If we see we're having a problem with one of our tires, hopefully we can pull over in time, fix it, replace it, do what we got to do, and then continue on before the tire maybe explodes and starts tearing everything up underneath. TPMS system, I personally think it's one of the most important things that we have.
I would say that is probably a pretty much must have.
Oh yeah, definitely. This was a day one item for us. Another thing, this is what I really want to talk about with tires, though. You'll get that TPMS information everywhere. Everybody talks about it. Something else to be aware of, though, is the date of your tires. How do you even know how old your tires are? Now, as a general rule of thumb, people will tell you to replace your tires every 5 years. I'm not going to sit here and tell you to replace your tires every 5 years. You may store your RV in the sun where it's baking every day, and maybe you don't have a great set of tires. Maybe they're just cheap and you got to replace them every 3 years. You may have the best tires in the world. You store your RV in a air-conditioned, humidified room, and maybe they'll last a little bit longer than that. That's a personal decision. But again, you should still know the date of your tire. How old are your tires? And it's very easy. If you go on the side of your tires, right next to the DOT numbers, it's going to end with 4 digits. Now these 4 digits are, the first 2 digits are the week of the year, and the last 2 digits are the year. And as an example, our tires, these 4 digits are 3620. What that means is our tires were manufactured the 36th year of 2020.
Week.
36
year?
No, yeah, 36 week.
Oh, talk about a couple screws loose. Where's my hammer?
Hey. So what that means is, our tires were manufactured the 36th week of 2020, which is, I believe, sometime in September. So at least now I know that. Now I can base, do I want to replace my tires or not based off of that date. So it's just something to know. And again, all the other tire safety stuff definitely goes hand in hand. Keep proper inflation, your tread, don't drive on bald tires and things like that. So these are just some things to think about when it comes to RV tires. The next thing we want to talk about is really you have to understand your RV measurements and weights. This is very, very important. Again, if you're just now researching RVs, you're looking to purchase one, you really need to kind of take this into consideration. A good example would be if you're looking at RVs, some of the larger ones, some of these big toy haulers, they're pushing, 18,000 pounds. What are you going to pull that with? Do you have a little tiny car? Do you have a F-150? Or do you have an F-450? It really depends.
It's important.
It's very important.
Issue.
An extreme safety issue. We've seen so many times coming into some of these RV parks, a great big fifth wheel being pulled by maybe a F-150 or a Chevy 1500. It's just...
And it'll be like a family.
Yeah.
Kids, young kids.
Now I'm sure it can be done, and it is being done. Yeah. It's just not safe. It's just not a good idea. So RV measurements and weights are very important. Know the empty weight, the full capacity, and then you can base, if you're looking to buy a tow vehicle, you're going to need these weights, or the other way around. If you have a tow vehicle that you're going to use, you need to know how much weight it can tow, how much it can carry before you start looking at RVs. So just keep that in mind. Don't just look at the biggest, prettiest RV and go purchase it just to realize you can't even carry it. The other important thing with RVs, kind of goes with weights, is measurements. One of the measurements, the very first thing that we did, and you have to do this when you're hooked up to your tow vehicle, is your height. And this is kind of scary. It still takes us a while to get used to this. When we're driving underneath some of these overpasses and some of these bridges, our RV is 13 feet 6 inches off the ground to the very top. Some of these overpasses are only 14 feet. Some are, slightly lower than that, slightly higher than that. I'm still cringing sometimes when we go underneath some of these bridges. It's still scary.
Duck!
Yeah. So that's just something else to be aware of when you're looking at RVs. Keep that in mind. You're going to want to know mainly the height of your RV.
Right.
You should really also know the length of your RV, the total length, the front of when you're towing from the front of your truck to the back of your RV. That's a good length to know for some of these RV spots. Some of them are pretty short. You may not be able to fit in some of them. So all these measurements and weights are very good to know. And it's a safety thing as well. The next thing we want to talk about are your RV holding tanks. these are, I mean, this is kind of the heart of your
Yeah.
RV. You really don't want to have problems with these because
No.
they're up underneath, and you start running into problems, it's kind of a pain. So a couple things just to be aware of on RV holding tanks. You kind of want to know the size of these tanks. A lot of these RVs, right, when you go and you look at them, they're beautiful. You get all psyched out with the colors and all the furnitures and everything. It really looks pretty. You know, basically all the bells and whistles. But if you have a large RV and maybe it only has a 20-gallon holding tank for your sewage, a black tank, it kind of defeats the purpose. You may be having to flush your tank every 3 or 4 days. You really don't want to do that, especially if you're in a large RV.
Yeah.
So if you are shopping around for RV, don't just look at the colors and the pretty furniture and
The bells and whistles.
the TVs and stuff. Understand your holding tanks. Another thing to understand with the holding tanks, in our particular case, we have 2 freshwater tanks. They're kind of combined into one, but they're 2 with a hose in between. We have 2 black tanks, that's for your sewage, and 2 gray tanks. That's for like our washer and dryer and the sink, bathroom sinks,
yeah.
and the shower. Something we did the very first week that we got our RV, and I think this is pretty important to
Yeah.
do as well. It's just good to know.
Yeah.
These tanks have sensors in them. These sensors, especially if you've been around RVs for a while, they don't last forever. They're just not that great. These sensors go bad on you. So one of the very first things we did, we made sure all of our tanks were empty. Then we closed all the valves, and we went one at a time. We started with the front bathroom. Mm-hmm. We turned on the sink. Mm-hmm. Just to find out where that water goes. Does that go into gray tank 1? Does that go into gray tank 2? And we wrote that down. Once we realized where that goes, we drained that water. We went to the shower.
Right.
We did the same thing with the front shower. Turned the shower on until we could see which tank was filling up. Again, now we know front shower goes to, gray tank 1 or gray tank 2. We did that for our showers, our toilets, mm-hmm. right, to find out black tanks. Washer and dryer, sinks. Anything that runs water that goes into a holding tank, we did that.
Yeah.
Now I keep a kind of like a master document with everything we need to know, everything that I know for RV, and that's in there with all my notes now. So I know our washer and dryer goes to gray tank 1. Now where this comes in handy is, especially if you may be out boondocking and you have a front tank that's filling up quicker than you hoped. Maybe you use a shower in the back, or maybe you use the restroom in the back instead of the restroom in the front. You use a sink, a back sink instead of a front sink. It gives you a little bit of options. It's just, honestly, it's just nice to know. It's nice to know. Now, what will happen, especially with the black tanks, over time, once you start RVing, over time, you're going to get a pattern, right? It doesn't matter that you know how many gallons it holds. What's going to happen is, every Friday we flush our black tanks, or every 4 days we have to flush our black tanks. That's what's really what it's going to boil down to. But it's also very nice to know where the water's going, what tank they're going into. And that may even help you out later on if you're troubleshooting a problem. If you have a water leak, let's say from your washer and dryer, something's leaking, well, it goes into gray tank 1, so it's going to be somewhere
Just
there.
remember, if you have company, though, those might change a little bit.
Yeah.
Time to flush and drain and all that good stuff might change just a little bit. Keep that in mind.
The next thing we want to talk about is really just general communication. So many times we're sitting in our RV, we watch new people come in, they're backing into a site. Normally the spouse, the wife, will get out and help guide her husband back. So many times all we hear is yelling and screaming back and forth. Turn right, no, your other right. Turn left, no, your other left. Stop, back up, wait, that's not what I meant. A lot of this can be solved by just better communication. And here's a couple ways of doing that. We never use, well, I should say, when we have to back into a site, I'm driving, I'm usually backing in, and Dina gets out and she'll guide me back and definitely help me watch for obstacles and things like that. we always use walkie-talkies.
Yes.
Here's one of the walkie-talkies that we use. Now what this does for us, a couple of things. We don't have to scream back and forth. We just talk into a walkie-talkie. We're not interfering with anybody.
Right.
We're not, being loud in the campground. We're just talking in walkie-talkies. Another way that some people we see do this is cell phones. Cell phones are great as long as you have cell coverage. So if you don't have cell coverage, now you're back to square one where you're yelling and screaming at each other again. So we like the walkie-talkies. It just makes our lives a lot easier. The other part of communication, though, is you need to understand each other. You need to know what the other person is talking about. One of the biggest mistakes that we see, or the biggest obstacles we see, left and right.
Yeah.
If Dina was to tell me turn left and she's facing the other direction, is it her left or is it my left? So we do things like turn to driver's side or turn to the non-driver side. Yeah. It's just, you can kind of come up with your own terminology, your own code, if that's what you want it. But it makes life a lot easier. There's no left or right mistakes if somebody says turn to the driver's side or turn to the passenger side.
Right.
As long as you both agree what that means, you're good to go. So there's just a couple tips on communication. The next thing we want to talk about, and I personally think this is extremely important. It's actually saved us a few times. Yeah. I'll let Dina explain. Checklist. We have a checklist for all the big steps, all the big things that we do. We have a travel day checklist. Actually, I can back up from there. We have checklists for like the night before, the day before, and actually in travel day, we have a checklist. We have a fifth wheel. So we have a checklist for hitching up the RV. We have another checklist for unhitching an RV. Now, starting out, to be honest with you, starting out, we were, step by step by step by step by step, because we were really nervous. We didn't want to forget anything.
Well, I'm still kind of like that, though.
I am too.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably starting to get a little bit laxed, but that's where it's kind of nice working in a team. Yeah. I tend to want to try to rush, especially when we're trying to leave somewhere in the morning, and Dina will always stop me and say, what about
pull test?
Yeah,
there's been a few times where I've had to tell you, we haven't done the pull test.
Yeah, so that's honestly a biggie. If you have a fifth wheel, or if you don't know what a pull test is, with the fifth wheel, once you hook up, you're gonna do what's called a pull test. You should have your stabilizers just off the ground, maybe an inch or two. So if it did happen to fall, your RV did happen to fall, it's only gonna fall an inch. So what you're really doing is once you hook up to an RV, you're kind of trying to pull your truck away to make sure that you're actually connected. That's called a pull test. Lots of times I get in a little bit of a hurry. For whatever reason, that's the step I always forget. This is where checklists come. They're just so important. Dina can sit there and look at the next step and say, what about the pull test? And this has happened multiple times. So checklist. Honestly, my parents have been RVing for 20, 30 years.
How old are you?
At least 25.
I almost choked.
They used to RV with Moses, so it's been a while. But they still use checklists. It's a sanity check. The last thing you want to do is to ruin your day because you forgot to disconnect your electrical cord when you're pulling out of an RV site, or you forgot to hook up your RV and it slams on the back of your pickup truck. Things like this. If you have a tow vehicle behind, if you're in Class A and you're pulling something, maybe you didn't hook up some pins or something. I don't know anything about those, but maybe you didn't hook up your tow vehicle correctly and you forgot a step, and now your tow vehicle is going down the road by itself somewhere. Checklists are very, very important. Don't overlook them when you're doing your RV or looking at RVs. Do a little bit of research on checklists. There's a lot of great information out there. We actually got our checklist based off of another YouTube channel. Yeah. And then we kind of modified it for our needs. So there's a lot of them out there. Don't pass them by. Do a checklist and
always use them as if it was your first time. I think that's the most important. Definitely. Never let them slide. Not even one little step.
Yeah. The next thing that we want to talk about, just at a very high level, I won't go into a lot of details, but it's just reservations.
Yeah.
Don't overlook reservations.
No. Especially this day and age.
Yeah, there's so many people RVing nowadays that a lot of these parks are hard to get into, especially if you're in a big rig like ours. You know, we have a 43-foot fifth wheel.
Yeah, a lot of them are limited to accommodate our size. So
yeah, we're already limited. There's a lot of national parks we can't get into, and some of the other parks have very limited space. Yeah. So start doing your reservations early. There's lots of times we're 9 months out. We'll do reservations up to 9 months out, especially if it's a very popular destination like a Yellowstone or something like that. So don't overlook your reservations. Don't just wing it. If you especially have a rig this size,
they're going to be able to take you, because
just do a little bit of research. We actually did a video on trip planning. You can look at that if you want. That goes into a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
But I just kind of want to let you know, reservations, be aware of them. Try to make them well ahead of time. The other thing with that is we always, whenever we book a reservation, we put all of our information in Google Calendar. It's just a way for us to store that information. Again, we may have 15, 20 reservations, in a row. For us, there's no way you're going to memorize all those. So we put everything into a calendar, all the phone numbers, all the information that we need, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
So.
And don't even think for a minute that the RV industry is slowing down, because I think I just told you recently, the biggest RV show that was in Tampa in January sold more RVs than they have yet to date. I can't remember the number, but RV industry is not slowing down anytime soon.
Reservations are hard, so the next thing we want to talk about. This is easy. It's kind of fun, actually, at times.
Kind of fun.
I think so. Reorganizing.
Because you haven't had to do it as much as I have. It's the big R. It's like a 4-letter word. It's never ending.
Yeah, you're gonna find out if you're on the road a lot, mainly if you're full-time, and you're gonna constantly be reorganizing, moving things from one shelf to another. I have an office in the back. Yeah, I just did it. I have an office in the back, and you get used to something, and then you think, well, maybe if I move something over here, I can get a little bit more space. And that's exactly what happens all the time. We constantly find ourselves rearrange it. It may not be something big. Doesn't have to be big.
Right.
It may just be a matter of maybe a filing cabinet in one place or another, and it makes a huge difference. Or maybe put shoes somewhere underneath the desk instead of on the floor. Things like that. Now Dina has a lot more that she does in the kitchen.
In the kitchen. The kitchen is never ending. And I would appreciate any tips that any of you have for reorganizing or organizing kitchen. I think it's just me personally, because I like things just such. But I recently actually was just watching some videos on people going to IKEA. IKEA seems to be a bit of good luck. People are having good luck finding the right size baskets or storage bins and such that fit inside, like the pantries and underneath the bathroom cabinet or in the bathroom cabinet or whichever. But I think I need to make a trip to IKEA. I think that's what I finally decided. I did hear that Target has some nice baskets for the back bathroom in our 397 TH. For the back bathroom, that's perfect. But I do think I want to make a trip to IKEA sometime soon.
We did a video on our first 1 month on the road. And if you look at that video, we did we kind of went over some of the organization stuff that we did. We did a lot of little small projects, but part of the video was how we organized what we had in the RV at that time. Right. Now after a month, we were both happy. We figured we're done. We're good to go. That's just the beginning. It's a constant, I don't want to call it a battle. Just something to be aware of. You're constantly going to be reorganizing. The next thing we want to talk about, this is very, very important. It's kind of a safety issue. Driving and or towing an RV. I've had pickup trucks my whole life. That's all I've ever really driven was pickup trucks. I've towed boats and trailers quite a bit as well. I've never towed an RV before though until we purchased one. Don't take it for granted. It's different, right? If you're pulling a 20-foot boat, there's a big difference between pulling a 20-foot boat and a 43-foot RV. Take your time. The best advice I could give you on something like this, whether it's a Class A, a Class C, anything, go find an empty parking lot one day when you first purchase your RV. Find an empty parking lot and practice.
Yeah.
Practice backing up, making turns, anything you can think of. It still, to today, surprises me when we're driving through a town, looking, going to a campground. Dina still has to remind me, make wide turns. There's an offset when you're making a turn. There's a huge offset. You really need to I'm not going to go into all the details, but you need to understand your turning radius. How does your particular RV or rig, how does yours set up? How does it turn? How wide do you have to make your turns, both left and right?
Yeah.
And then again, also backing up.
And the tail swing. Be cautious of your tail swing.
Exactly. Yeah. Tail swing, you got to watch out for your tail swing as well. So these are all things to be aware of when you are purchasing an RV. Again, if you're nervous about something like that, if you don't think you feel comfortable pulling a 40-foot RV, maybe downsize a little bit. Yeah. Pull, something a little bit smaller, something you feel comfortable with. But again, when you're looking at RVs, these are things you have to think about. Don't get hung up. The salesman's going to try to, sell you on all the pretty lights and everything. You got to think about some of the other stuff and some of the logistics that go behind it as well. The last thing we want to talk about in today's video, again, this is something you have to think about just to be a good RVer, but it's etiquette, RV etiquette. Now, a lot of stuff goes without saying, just common sense. It's not even particular to being an RVer. It's just being nice to other people. Considerate, treating people politely. But there's a few things in RVing that I guess is specific to RVing. And we see these. These are probably the things that we see more often than not. There's other things that people do that we don't really agree with, but these are probably some of the bigger things we see. One of the things, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, I don't like seeing, is walking through somebody else's campsite. It's just not polite. You got to think, your neighbor, his or her campsite, they paid for that, right? They paid for it the same way that you paid for yours. That's their property for the night or for the day or for the week, whatever it is. They don't want you walking through their property to get a shortcut to go to the bathroom or a shortcut to the beach or whatever. Just respect their property.
I'm surprised still how much that goes on.
We've actually have been sitting outside eating dinner at our picnic table and have somebody walk right past us through our site to go wherever they were going to, and we didn't say anything.
To the dog park, or
we didn't say anything, but come on, people.
I could never.
A little bit of common courtesy.
Yeah.
Another thing that we see this again quite often is late night arrivals. Now, I'm not saying you can't arrive late at night. Things happen, right? You break down, you get a late start, maybe bad weather, whatever the case may be. Right. If you do arrive late, and I'm talking, midnight, early into the morning.
Like last night.
Like last night with us. You only need to set up your RV enough to make it through the night, right? And what I mean is, of course, level it, get your slides out, hook up your electric, your water, your sewer if you think you need it. But you don't need to be setting up your grills, your camping chairs,
your plants, flags,
your
campfire,
all this kind of stuff at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Like last night.
Yeah, like last night. You don't need to be dragging out some tables and stuff. Just be courteous. You may not realize how noisy it is, but campgrounds are usually pretty quiet at night, and you hear a lot of things. So again, if you do arrive late at night, do the minimums. Do what you need to do to make it comfortable for yourself for the night, but then just do the rest later the next day. Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about is parking. Now, you can't do this all the time, but I try to think of others, think of my neighbors on either side of me when I park my tow vehicle. And it gets to, and you can't do this all the time, I try to park my tow vehicle thinking that if somebody was going to pull into the site next to me on either side of me, how are they going to get in there? Where can I put my tow vehicle that's not going to be in their way? Now, honestly, I'm being selfish because I don't want somebody to hit my tow vehicle. That's really the main reason.
But we don't.
Yeah, we don't. But it sounds better if I'm doing it for them. But honestly, I don't want somebody hitting my vehicle. Right. But I also, if I have the option, now luckily the place we're at right now is huge. This is probably one of the biggest campsites that we've had.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of options where I can park my tow vehicle. I decided to park it towards the front. I park it sideways. It's out of the road. People on either side of us have plenty of room to get in. Now, if I wanted to be a jerk, I could park, maybe closer to the road, park it the long ways off to the side where somebody had to make a real tight turn to get into their site. So again, just be a little bit considerate.
If you can, because there are times, that it's not possible.
We've been in places that you have one place to put it, and there's not even room for that. So again,
room for
if you have the option, just something else to think about. Again, this is something that happened to us here recently too. Last weekend, I believe it was a Friday night.
Saturday night.
Saturday night.
Yeah.
People partying. Now, I'm not a fuddy-duddy. I like to party. I used to, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just a group of young people, Saturday night, partying. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I could care less. They were drinking. I could care less.
They were getting on top of cars, surfing.
It got to the point, where they were standing on the rooftops of cars, dancing. Everybody had a bottle of liquor in their hand.
Yeah.
They started getting pretty loud. Somebody may have complained because they did stop
all of a
at
sudden,
that point. Yeah, pretty quickly they stopped. So again, partying. Nothing wrong with it, but just be considerate of others. We have in our campground where we're at right now, there's actually a lot of construction workers in here. They're kind of living here semi-permanently for a while. They leave at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So if you're partying late at night during the week, these guys have to get up and go to work. So just be a little bit considerate of them. I think if they were leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning and they were yelling and screaming while you're trying to sleep, you probably wouldn't like that either. So just be considerate of others.
That's how we feel anyway.
That's how we feel.
Yeah.
Now probably the last thing, the thing that everybody talks about when it comes to etiquette, and we see this almost daily.
Yeah.
It's a shame. Picking up after your dogs.
Yeah.
This is something that
they seem to be pretty good here about it.
Yeah,
but there's so many places and truck stops, rest areas, I should say.
That people just don't pick up after their animals. And I don't understand. It's not that big of a deal.
No.
We see it almost everywhere. Everywhere we go, you pull into a new site and there's a present there waiting for you.
Yeah.
So again, just pick up after yourself, pick up after your animals.
Yeah.
Last thing we're going to talk about, and then we'll close this out, picnic tables.
Yeah.
This is something else that I don't get it. We've seen people when they're disconnecting their sewer hoses, lay them on top of a picnic table as they're trying to pack up. People put grills on there, dirty clothes, underwear, whatever you can think of, they put on top of these picnic tables. I eat on a picnic table. I'm sure you eat off a picnic table too. I don't want to be
tablecloth, but still, I
don't want to be eating where somebody's putting their sewer hose. So again, common sense, courtesy, think of other people, and hopefully everybody's happier. We can all sing Kumbaya together.
We hope that you enjoyed today's video. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, ring the red bell, and leave us any comments or questions below. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, always live life to the fullest.
Pick up your dog potty.